For the last 6 weeks, we have been talking about dare to repair, replenishing versus replacing broken relationships. This whole series has been written out of a heavy heart of conviction that we have forgotten how to stick with difficult relationships. I honestly, truly believe that my parents' generation and my grandparents' generation were a lot tougher when it came to sticking to difficult relationships. We are so quick to replace difficult relationships, whether it's in our marriage, whether it's in our families, whether it's in our friendships, or our workplaces, or even our church. It's just so much easier to replace instead of replenish. In Hosea chapter 2, the Lord is reaching out to a very difficult people. Israel has been engulfed in idolatry and false god worship for 724 years, ever since the golden calf and all of that, when Aaron made the golden calf while Moses was getting the laws. And it's been off and on for 724 years. He could have easily found somebody else. Forget these guys. There's got to be somebody else who will turn their heart toward me. But instead of replacing, for 725 years, Jesus keeps trying to replenish, to rebuild, to reconnect. What does that say to us? What does that say to us? Last week, we talked about getting through what we called the tunnel of chaos. We used an analogy that Bill Hybels talks about, that if you're going to build great relationships, every single relationship, whether at home, at work, at church, at school, friendships, neighborhood, every inner circle relationship has to go through the tunnel. And it's very long, and it's very dark, and it's very painful. Some people don't want to go through it. They just turn around and dump the relationship, get a new one, and then that one goes to the tunnel. They turn around because they won't go through it. Or some will make them halfway through, the price gets too big, and they dump the relationship. I really do believe generations before us had a little bit more grit. They did a little better job getting through the tunnel than we do. We are a culture that replaces, just like the aerosol can we talked about 2 weeks ago. In Hosea chapter 2, verses 19 and 20, Hosea and the Lord begins to describe the kind of relationships that can be had if you go through the tunnel, if you make it through. Israel's tunnel of chaos was the exile. 70 years in Babylon. That was their tunnel of chaos. They never had any trouble with worship of foreign gods after that. In fact, they almost went the other way, became legalistic. That was their tunnel of chaos. There are people in this room, in some area of your life, you have a relationship that's in a tunnel of chaos. Will you make it through? Will you pay the price for that relationship? Will you love that person for Christ's sake? And if you do, what's waiting on the other side? In verses 19 and 20 of Hosea chapter 2, he begins to describe what's on the other side. 7 characteristics. Write them down. Number 1. The first characteristic of a relationship that makes it through the tunnel is that relationship is timeless. It's timeless. I want you to look at verse 19, first phrase, I will betroth you. That phrase is repeated 3 times in 2 verses. I will betroth you. And then it says, I will betroth you to me, what? What? Forever. Have you ever noticed an elderly couple holding hands? You know, about 20 years ago, I'd say, have you ever noticed an elderly couple in their 60s or 70s? Well, the only thing that's changed is not 60s anymore, it's 70s and 80s. But everybody loves to see a couple, whether they're coming to church or walking down the sidewalk or maybe at the mall and they're holding hands. Everybody loves that. Why? Because that relationship has passed the test of time. Or sometimes when you see two old fellas, you know, they've been friends for 50 years. They go fishing together for the last 25 years. They could finish each other's sentences. You know, they're that tight. It's past the test of time. Or sometimes sports teams. I remember this will date me, but I remember Larry Bird, Robert Parrish, and Kevin McHale, the front line of the Boston Celtics, won all kinds of championships. Or the Lakers. The Lakers in the 70s was Jerry West, Wilt Chamberlain, and Gail Goodrich. And then in the 80s, it was Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and James Worthy. And then in the 90s, it was Kobe Bryant, Shaq, and L.C. Green. And every one of those great teams won all kinds of championships. Or even in ministry, probably the greatest team I ever followed. Greatest team wasn't a sports team. Billy Graham, Cliff Barrows, George Beverly Shea. I know that dates me, but those boys were together for over 50 years. Brought millions of people to Jesus that passed the test of time. One thing that I'm enjoying every now and then, when we have baby dedications, I've actually started dedicating babies of the babies. I'm starting to marry young couples of young couples, you know. I'm on my second generation. And one of these days I'll do, a third generation. Maybe if the Lord tarries, I'll do 4. I'll come up to the altar with my cane, and marry a third or fourth generation. Because I've absolutely thrilled with the long-term relationship. That a guy who just jumps around from church, he'll never know it. He'll never know the joy, the depth of meaning, because relationships pass the test of time. That's what a relationship looks like that makes it through the tunnel. Are you with me? Write this down. The second characteristic, healthy relationships are tested. They're timeless, but they're also tested. In the next phrase of verse 19, I will betroth you in what? Righteousness. Righteousness is an act of doing right. In fact, you can't have righteousness without the possibility of unrighteousness. You have to have the ability to choose. Righteousness comes out of someone who is being tried, who's being tested, who's being tempted, and he chooses the right way. That's righteousness. See? And he's saying that I bring this righteousness into this relationship. Note this, I don't want you to miss this. God is bringing a righteousness into an unrighteous relationship. For 724 years, Israel's been worshiping false gods. They are unrighteous. But the Lord is saying, you make it through this tunnel of chaos, you pay the price. I'm going to bring righteousness into unrighteousness. That's important to me. Do you know why? Because I'm speaking to a people who have failed in relationships. For all have sinned. For all have blown it. Including yours truly. Guys, we live in a culture inside the church. I'm not talking about the world. Inside the church. We've got, it is not just a few. We've got about 50% of us are on our second or third marriage. We've had failures in that. We've had some that are on their 4th, 5th, or even 20th job. They just can't seem to settle. Like I said earlier, the musical chairs in churches, it's crazy in the Roanoke Valley. No lasting relationship. Something happens, you don't like it, I'm out of here, and go to the next show. And sometimes when that happens and we don't have a good track record, we buy into the enemy's lie that says, I've fallen short, I've failed, I don't deserve God's best. But here you have an example of somebody or a nation blowing it for 724 years. And God saying, I'm going to bring righteousness into this unrighteous relationship. See, guys, don't listen to the enemy's lies. Wherever you are right now, whether it's family situation, marriage, whether it's work, whether it's church, wherever God has you right now, you can experience His righteousness. Isn't that great? I mean, that deserves an amen or something. We can have His best no matter what our track record is. I need to hear that. I need to hear it as a preacher because I've blown it. Great, healthy relationships that make it through the tunnel of chaos, they're tested. They have a righteousness. Write this down. Healthy relationships are built on truth. The next phrase of verse 19 says, I will betroth you in righteousness and what? Justice. Somebody said righteousness is applying God's truth to you. Justice is applying God's truth to the people around you. That's justice. One definition of justice that I wrote down, justice is conformity to truth. God is bringing His justice into this relationship. As a result of that, you know what a good thing to do is in a healthy relationship? Make sure you get the closet empty. Because healthy relationships live in the light. They don't live in the darkness. When God brings His justice, He's bringing His light into that relationship. Healthy relationships are transparent. What you see is what you get. So if there's something in that closet, man, we better get that thing out of there. Because one of two things is going to happen. Either the Lord's going to bring that out through His justice, or the enemy's going to come along and pull that thing out right at the worst moment. Can I get a witness on that? Healthy relationships live in the light. Transparent, honest. Are you with me this morning? Healthy relationships are built on timelessness, they're tested, and they're built on truth. Number 4. Am I ready for number 4? Healthy relationships. In healthy relationships, people are treasured. In healthy relationships, people are treasured. The next word in verse 19, they're kind of like God in Hosea chapter 2, verse 19, is just kind of going down this list of what a great relationship looks like. And the next word is the word love. I will betroth you in love. Do you know where a dangerous place for a Christ follower to live is? I mean, if you're a true Christ follower, do you know where a dangerous place to live is? It's dangerous to live in a place where your heart doesn't love what He loves. It's a dangerous place. It's a dangerous place for your heart not to love what He does love. Are you with me this morning? In your families, thank you, Mary. Mary is my cheering section. In your families, sometimes I remember when the girls were young, I would love their accomplishments, especially in basketball. All 3 of my girls played basketball, and I kind of lived vicariously through their basketball because I was a lousy basketball player, and I wanted to win championships through my kids, you know? So I would celebrate their accomplishments. Careful. Careful. God loves your kids, period. Whether they hit the home run or whether they strike out. God loves our kids, period. Not just their accomplishments. Are you with me this morning? You know that boss you cannot stand? Jesus died for that guy. You know that raise that you would absolutely love to have? Jesus loves the guy you're going to have to beat out to get that raise. Careful. Be careful what you love. Last week we talked about, the tongue and how, this Facebook stuff and how easy it is for the tongue to do damage now because there's so much technology. Every time something shows up, something that we don't like, maybe about the church, and instead of doing a Matthew 18 thing and going to the right person, we go to Facebook, and you know what happens? We put a black eye on the bride of Christ in front of the whole world. Do you know how he feels about that? He might care, maybe he doesn't care about whatever you're upset about, but I'll tell you what he is upset about. Making the bride of Christ look bad out there. Be careful when you love what he does not love, and be careful when you don't love what he does love. I am telling you, he is in a love affair with the local church. It's his bride. So be careful how we handle it. I remember, I'm going to dwell on this just a tad longer. There's a dear friend, Bill and Edie Ward, when they were still in Roanoke. Loved him to death. Loved both of them to death. And they had a dog. Some of you remember Bill and Edie. They had a dog named Gabe. Remember Gabe? And they loved that dog. They had one son, Ben. I love Ben. And because they just had that one son, they had a little leftover energy to take care of this dog, and it had been part of their family forever. Kath and I have 2 high-stress jobs and 3 kids. We got no room for dogs. So we come to you animal lovers, we come across a little harsh. Sorry about that. But, there's just not much room when you got high-stress jobs and 3 girls. Well, I remember when Gabe died. And they buried him. Remember that? Remember when Gabe died, Carol? Gabe, whatever it was. I knew Carol would know the answer because she's the biggest animal lover of this whole church. Abe. You sure? Okay, it was Abe. And he died. And they buried him in their backyard and put a statue of the Francis of Assisi, because Francis of Assisi is the patron saint of pets or animals. And I remember when we found out, and we were kind of cutting up, and we weren't taking it, as seriously as maybe we should have. And I remember all of a sudden, I remember it was downstairs in the basement. All of a sudden, a little tear rolls down Bill's cheek. And I froze. I froze when I saw that tear. Because all of a sudden it dawned on me. I was on a different page than Bill. And all the joking stopped. I turned it on a dime. So I might not have loved Gabe or Abe or whatever his crazy name was, but I loved Bill. And I wanted my heart to be on the same page that Bill's heart was on. That's the way it needs to be with Jesus. That is the mark of a healthy relationship that makes it through the tunnel. Are you with me this morning? Where are we at? Healthy relationships are tempered. Write that down. Healthy relationships are tempered. The last word in verse 19 is compassion. I will betroth you with compassion. Have you ever been in a relationship, whether at work, at home, I hope not, but maybe even at home, or at church, or on the ball team, wherever there were some relationships, and you had to walk on eggshells around some particular person because you didn't know when the explosion might come? Anybody relate to that? You ever had to do that where you walk around because you want to be a little careful because somebody had a short fuse? I eat in a couple of restaurants pretty consistently. You all know about Famous A's and about Jersey Lilies. Thank you. You guys knew that. But also El Rodeo and Sal's, and there's a couple of others. So I think I can say this without risking any identity thing. This is not somebody at church, but thank God. But there's a couple of guys that they eat regularly together. And one of them's got a short fuse. And old timer, bless his heart. And a couple of weeks ago, the waitress didn't quite get there soon enough. And she does tend to talk a little bit. And she didn't quite get there soon enough. And he gave her both barrels. Cussing, swearing, whole 9 yards, loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear. Blew her out of the water. I sat there debating what to do about that. Next week, same thing, different waitress on the other side of the restaurant. Coffee was a little cold. And he gave her both barrels with all the colorful language. Loud enough for everybody to hear. In a crowd this size, there are those here that have short fuses. And people have to walk on eggshells around you. It's so wonderful that you get to unload your baggage so you don't have to carry it. So you just unload it and let the rest of it carry us. Let the rest of us carry it for the next 2 or 3 weeks. It just blesses our heart. Everybody in this room, everybody needs a safe place. Everybody needs that. For their mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical health. Everybody needs a safe place. And one of those places, in fact, the first place that needs to be safe is home. Home ought to be where you can mess up and not get crucified for it. And the second place ought to be church. I want this to be a safe place for you, where you can come and get renewed in your spirit and be built up in your faith. Be encouraged. If you're one of the ones that people walk on eggshells around, I need you to get a life. I don't care how you were raised. Don't care what happened. Don't care how your mom or your dad raised you. You're an adult. Get a life. Stop dumping your baggage on everybody else and taking away their safe place. That is not a healthy relationship. And you're an adult. Change it. Just a thought. Healthy relationships are tempered with compassion. Number 6. Am I ready for number 6? Healthy relationships are built on trust. That's the first phrase of verse 20. We're moving into verse 20. I will betroth you. There's that phrase. I will betroth you. I will betroth you. I will betroth you in faithfulness. In faithfulness. God brings a faithfulness to the table. There's something interesting that happens in Hosea. It's one of the reasons I went to it to begin with. Sometimes in the Old Testament, the Lord would take a prophet and actually have the prophet live out the prophecy that the Lord was giving. And for Hosea, he had married this gal named Gomer. Guys, how'd you like to have a wife named Gomer? Doesn't that just fill you with warm fuzzies, you know? Probably looks like Gomer Pyle or something like that. That's what I think of when I get Gomer. Give me a break. And this gal, she betrays him, and she goes into prostitution. She's jumping in bed with every guy around. So Hosea kind of plays the role of God, the father, and Gomer is playing the role of Israel. And the Lord, in His efforts to convey how hard He's working, not to replace, but to replenish, He tells Hosea, bring Gomer back. Well, shoot, man. Her name's bad enough, let alone her conduct. But look in chapter 3, verse 1, and follow this. The Lord said to me, go show your love to your wife. Again, though she is loved by another man and is an adulteress, love her as the Lord loves the Israelites. Though they turn to other gods and love the raisin cakes. So I bought her for 15 shekels of silver. That's about 6 ounces of silver. And about an omer and a lethek of barley. That's about 430 pounds. Oh, I wonder if I got that right. 430 pounds of barley. Then I told her, you are to live with me many days. You must not be a prostitute or be intimate with any man, and I will behave the same way toward you. So here's Hosea playing the Lord's part. So the Israelites can watch right in front of them an illustration of how God is trying to treat them by the way that Hosea is treating Gomer. So you know what's happening here? I don't want you to miss it. If you don't get anything else, get this. God is bringing faithfulness into an unfaithful relationship. God has called Hosea to be faithful to a woman who has not been faithful. That's important to me. Do you know why? Because there are people in this room that God is calling you to be faithful in an unfaithful relationship. Boy, that's tough. That's tough. Boy, this relationship stuff is not for the timid of heart. That's what God has done for you and me. And for many people in this room, all of us at one time or another, but for some of you right now, there is a relationship in your inner circle. He's asking you to be faithful to an unfaithful person. And Hosea does this. He brings Gomer back. But you know, he doesn't do it for Gomer's sake. He does it for his father's sake. Would you love Jesus enough to be faithful in an unfaithful relationship? I'm not just talking marriage. I'm talking family. I'm talking work. I'm talking church. Wherever there's an inner circle relationship where someone has undercut or stabbed you in the back, would you love them for Jesus' sake? Be faithful in an unfaithful relationship. The last thing I want to share, the last characteristic, is that healthy relationships that make it through the tunnel are tender. The last phrase of verse 20 says this, and you will acknowledge the Lord. In some of your Bibles, there's a lot of different translations, especially the word acknowledge. In the New International, the more recent version, it's acknowledge. But in some of the other translations, it's knowledge or to know the Lord. And if you do your homework and you get into some of the Hebrew stuff, it's a much deeper meaning than that. It actually means that you will know me. You will know the Lord intimately. And I'm going to be transparent with you on this. Intimately, as intimate as a husband and wife's sexual relationship. It's that intimate. Do you know what that means? In this difficult relationship where the Lord has tried to reach out to this wayward nation, He is saying, I'm just not going to be faithful to an unfaithful nation. But there's a day coming, I'm going to restore our intimacy, our tenderness. When Hosea brings Gomer into the house, it's not to say, okay, Gomer, we're under one roof, but your bedroom's over there and mine's over there. It's not that. God actually restores the intimacy between a husband and wife, even though it went that bad, even though the hurt was that deep. The intimacy comes back. You know, there's a depth of healing when you're healed to that level. You know, I'm treading on thin ice. I know I am. Lord, help me on this. Some of you ladies, the ladies are primarily feeling oriented, right? Emotionally. So if you're going to have a really intimate, healthy, loving relationship at night, it matters what happened all day long. Am I right about it? It matters what happened all day long if you're going to have this intimate relationship. Guys, we're not that way. We're not wired that way. We can have the lousiest day on the face of the earth, and then one look at our wives coming out of the shower, we're ready to go. I don't care if the boss fired us, we're ready to go. Because we're sight-oriented, but I know I'm on thin ice. Everybody kind of going like this. So at the end of the day, given this, I've gone here before, so I'm going to go there one more time. Everybody comes home around the supper time. You know, the kids come in from school, wife comes in from work, husband comes in from work. Got to put on the meal. You know what the guy does? Plops down in front of the TV and watches the news while the wife is getting the meal. Or in the old days, it would be the newspaper, but that's all by the wayside now. But, you know, either your iPad or TV or whatever, while she's slaving away, getting supper. And then you eat, right? You eat. And then after you eat, you guys go down to your man cave and watch sports or spy movies or something like that while she cleans the dishes. You know, ladies, it's a great time for an amen there or something. I'm handing them on a silver platter and you're missing the boat, okay? And then they have to do the homework, and then they have to get the kids to bed, which might involve a bath or two. And finally, it's around 10:30 at night, and they fall into bed exhausted. About that time, the bedroom door slowly opens. And there you guys are, with your droopy drawers, your gut hanging over your droopy drawers, and a twinkle in your eye. And you say, "My name is Bond, James Bond." And your wife looks at you and says, "My name is Isis." As in a cold day and you know where. You know, rolls over, turns off the light. We're sight-oriented. Our brides are feeling-oriented. So if there is this intimate, healthy relationship, physical relationship, that is satisfying for both, you know what that means? There has been a deep-seated healing that goes all the way down. No Band-Aid on cancer. True healing. That is what a relationship looks like that makes it through the tunnel all the way.